Welcome to the podcast where sustainability gets real. I'm Alan Stenson, I'm your host, and in each episode we uncover the people, ideas and actions driving the journey to net zero. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Emission Possible. This is the podcast where we literally discuss anything and everything to do with ESG, sustainability, the journey to net zero, and all of the ins and outs of what that looks like. Today, I am absolutely delighted to be joined by someone who's genuinely making a real impact across the FM facilities management world, not just in how organizations operate, but in how people grow, learn, and progress within the industry. Maxcene Quirke is the founder of the MCFM Global Academy and the UK Managing Director of Globe Williams International. She's an international speaker, a mentor, an author, and a hugely respected voice when it comes to the FM transition, training, and social impact. Through her work, she's helping to upskill the sector, really empower disadvantaged communities and shape the next generation of FM professionals. And what I really admire is her focus isn't just on operations, it's on people, it's on purpose, and it's on creating real opportunity. Maxcene, it's always an absolute pleasure to speak with you, and I'm delighted to finally have you on the show.
Oh, thank you. And it's such an honor to be here with you, Alan. I'm really happy to be here.
Fabulous. Well, I know you had me on your podcast a while back, so I've been owing you an episode for a while. So I'm glad we could finally make it happen. But yeah, I think one of the things I really wanted to discuss with you is that where you see FM really. Where you see the transition heading, so like things like how contracts, delivery models, and client expectations are shifting. What's your view on what you're seeing happening at the moment?
Yeah, so Alan, going back a few short years, then you would have the contracts being very cost driven. To some degree, they still are, but it was really that emphasis on the cheapest price for the service and throwing everything into that service delivery model, cramming as much in for the lowest price without any thought really around the quality of the service, sustainability, the environment, the social impact. It was kind of a little bit lost because of the price. And we see that price culture still, especially when it comes to training and development and learning as well. So when it comes to contracts now, what's shifting is the clients are a lot more intelligent and aware of not only the sustainability and the environmental impact for their own organizations, but also for the service providers and for the supply chain that deliver the services, from the source of, okay, if it's something that's produced outside of the UK and it's from a Asia or Middle Eastern country, what does that supply chain look like? How is sustainability? How is it being monitored to ensure that there's that compliance in terms of it's been done in an ethical sourced way and it's also sustainable and kind to the environment. And that can be said of chemicals, just cleaning contracts and consumables. How are they made? No longer are we looking at the toxic components like bleaches and things like that. It's more natural water-based products that are being seen, and also the methods as well of how you perform a service is changing. So there has been that transformation, I feel, within the industry, more so now than it's just about the cost. It isn't. It's so much more.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I'd like to echo the sentiment around the understanding, the intelligence around the conversation itself, because I think people are now so much more aware than they ever were before, and I think that's what's also driving a lot of the change, because legislation does play a role, but it's capturing businesses of a certain size, and I think other businesses are realizing that this is something that we need to do, and there is a cost well, sorry, there's a price of what you pay for something, but there's a cost of doing business. And
Yeah.
I think people are understanding now that the decisions that they make, so who they buy a product from, who they commission a service through, impacts them. And if they can't make a decision um, based on some facts around what the impact of that decision is,
Yeah.
then that's a risk. People are realizing, well, actually, I don't know whether if by buying this product or working with that supplier, for instance, is that helping or hindering my journey to net zero? And if I don't know that information, that's a risk I probably can't take. And that's just going to start to happen more and more, which is, I think, something we're seeing happening across the board now, much more than it ever was before.
For sure, and I think as well, one area is that sometimes as if it's a large organization, they may tend to look at very large suppliers and manufacturers for delivering the solutions. However, what can get missed, and a few years ago we looked at, okay, well, how can we increase our diverse supply chain as well to
Yeah.
deliver? And also, even at a local level, there may be suppliers that are working ethically with sustainable products. There's innovation. Innovation happens all the time. Sometimes it may not be a big player. Sometimes it might be a local, regional supplier that's delivering that solution. So it's also ensuring that we're including our local regional supply chains in the solutions that we're looking to offer our clients that are
Mm.
environmentally friendly.
Yeah, totally agree. And all of that plays into the whole sort of wider aspect of why ESG and Scope 3 visibility and net zero policies, why they're shaping or reshaping operational decisions. I mean, I think we're in a different environment now.
Yeah.
Those decisions that were being made before, like you say, were probably traditionally very much based on price, and it was, then you're in a scenario where it's a race to the bottom, and that on its own isn't sustainable. But that's, it's not sustainable from a commercial perspective, but
Mm.
let alone the whole impact of what we're doing. So I think we are starting to see a real difference in attitude towards it. And what are your thoughts in terms of the culture shift required, and helping people to really understand that we need to move away from that cost-driven thinking to more value and resilience and long-term capability? Are you seeing that starting to come through, or do you think we've got
Yeah,
some more work to do there?
I think there's still some work to do, because when it's a company where you talk about it's about the bottom line and the profitability and making sure we can make our margins, that's all well and good and important. But
Hmm.
it's got to start in the boardroom. It's got to start with the lead, with our leaders and our leadership, and that has to drive the message through the organization to start that cultural shift and that mentality change of thinking about your environment first, thinking about your ESG first, thinking about the people that we're working with, or the people providing those services, and flipping that, and that's the cultural change will always take time, especially if it's an organization that's been established for many years. I think the new companies and supply chains that are coming up now, they're already in that mindset of sustainability, and so it's easy for them to implement the culture from the very beginning. Whereas I think
Yeah.
when it's a large organization talking internationally as well, it just takes longer for that message to get through.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's probably what's holding back a number of businesses to drive that change as quickly as you'd like. But what else do you think is holding back organizations? And I guess
I
also, what
think
would you say good looks like from 26 onwards? Like, what should we be aspiring to achieve?
Yeah, I think it's as simple as knowing where to start.
Yeah.
If you're a very complex organization, where do you even begin to have those conversations about ESG, about the sustainability? And whilst we all have an individual responsibility, it's down to me to take some ownership and responsibility. I guess the message is start where you are. So
Hmm.
if there's absolutely nothing, it's great organizations like yours, Alan, and companies that actually talk about sustainability and solutions, green solutions, and getting getting the knowledge and increasing your knowledge about and understanding what it means. So when someone talks about scope 3, you glaze over because it's like, well, what the hell is scope 3? And understanding those different levels and where the responsibilities sit with the suppliers, that's where you start. So looking at organizations and companies that provide that knowledge and those insights, starting there and then saying, well, how can we start small? First of all, you can't just do everything in one hit. It's about starting small, phasing it over time, and also starting to achieve the credentials as well, and demonstrate, okay, now that we've done, say, phase 1 of implementing that culture and that mindset of ESG, let's now move on to the next phase. An example that I could give, a few years ago, I used to work on a very large account as a sourcing manager, and whilst at the main service provider would have all of the ESG strategies, solutions, but it wasn't filtering down to the operational teams. So whilst the operation teams they'd have the champions in the different regions that would champion ESG, come together in forums to say, okay, what are the initiatives that are happening in your region? And that exchange of best practice and knowledge, also exchange of suppliers that were working really well with them, that focused on green or looking at phasing out of products that they were using and bringing in the green with the agreement and consensus from the clients as well. So those are things that would happen locally, but then joining the dots between the service provider, the main facility management company, and what they were doing on the ground, because sometimes there's a disconnect of not seeing what's happening and what the strategy is here and the long-term plan versus what you're doing on a day-to-day operational level with your teams and with your colleagues. And just to say, that was actually how In the Spotlight started.
Oh, wow. Okay.
A few years ago, because it was all about joining the dots. So instead of there being a disconnect between either the sustainability, ESG, what the objectives was strategically, I would get them to present to the operational managers and teams so that it joined the dots and made sure there was an alignment and everyone's working towards the same goals. So that's how In the Spotlight started all those years ago.
I love that. That's great. Yeah, and it's so true, and I think it's still true to this day, because there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of situations where I think people are inherently finding themselves in a role that has a lot of responsibility now from an ESG perspective, that they don't necessarily have the training or the experience or know-how, but they have the responsibility. So I think there's a real gap in terms of the support that people need. I've literally created a course now. It's an ESG accelerator course to help people to really upskill themselves so that they can have confidence in driving ESG from within their business, because a lot of people are either still doing another role, like it might be someone from finance or someone from HR or someone from marketing, and then suddenly they also now have the responsibility of ESG. And I think that's a burden that can be, that needs to be supported, because it can be such an integral and key role within a business, and it should get that support. But I think generally speaking, there is a real gap, not just in FM, I think, but across the board. But we're clearly seeing it in FM. But what do you think is missing in terms of the world of FM? From is it digital literacy, is to carbon literacy? Is it just general know-how in terms of impact? What impacts an organization's performance? What do you see as real gaps that need filling right now particularly within FM?
I think there's we talk about the skills gaps in FM, and my academy was created to bridge the gaps. Yes, it focuses on transition and mobilization, but there's other gaps. We talk about the literacy. You've created the course around the ESG. That is filling the gap that probably didn't exist in the way that you've created it. Similar to the academy, where focusing on the mobilization transformation, it's bridging a gap that doesn't exist. So we have the pain here, as in the lack of knowledge, know-how, and the vehicle to upskill is like your course, is the academy, to then give us the solutions and to support companies and individuals on their journey and understand how it impacts them. So I think there's gaps, but they have to be filled by training and development, and embedding the skills. It's not just about the course, it's about embedding those skills in organizations, and that takes time as well. So that's quite important.
I totally agree, and it's making sure that it's relatable and it's understood, making sure that being aware of the fact that like workforce competency directly affects net zero delivery and FM effectiveness. And it's all well and good understanding the theory behind something, but making sure people understand practically what does that mean, what does that look like, and what can we do. Yeah. I mean, I've seen net zero buildings losing their status because of the occupancy of the building. You can have all the relevant measures in place, low carbon materials and everything that goes into that building, but that can be to a degree undone with a lack of awareness internally within the building from an operational perspective, and how it's being actually utilized from within. So I think training full stop, it needs to be much more prevalent, and I think a report is one thing, but what does it mean? Is it relatable? Will people in the business really sort of understand what that means and the relevance of a number? So making it sort of something that somebody can understand and digest is clearly got to be a real driver for that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Alan, it's also bringing the client on that journey as well.
Yeah.
So it's not just... So I remember years ago when we used to do like the ISO accreditations, and you're putting processes in place, and it's saying, it's about what you're doing now. It's not painting that blue sky picture. And ESG and how we adopt and do the reporting and implement net zero practices, that's no different. You're starting where you are, and it's actually a journey. It's not just, okay, we've done that now, we've ticked that box, we move on. So it's actually making it real and continuing the message on an ongoing basis and bringing the client along the journey as well. So it hopefully prevents buildings from losing their status, because, the awareness is across the stakeholders and the operation.
Yeah, absolutely. What is there anything you can share in terms of MCFM Academy on like modern training, how that differs from legacy approaches? What's your approach when it comes to imparting the knowledge?
Yes, so in terms of the academy, the format is very much how I'm utilizing AI and technology to first of all develop. So there's online, which is very digital. We create video content as well, because of sometimes people learn through watching visuals to get the message. There's gamification in terms of the quizzes and the type of assessments to help test the level of understanding. But what's really important to point out is that the subject matter experts that we have are from industry, and the learning is very much practical application, not theory. So when anyone comes and they take a course or they take a workshop, they're able to literally walk away and put that learning into action that same day. And that's the difference really. With traditional, it's very much theory based, whereas we are 100% practical based, and the subject matter experts are from different parts of the industry that cover the topics, And that's quite important to point out.
Yeah, I love that. And I know you also do a lot of work with, developing opportunities for the next generation. Maybe you can talk us through some of that.
Yeah. So I'm part of the strategic board for future leaders, and it's actually from the hospitality industry. So if I do a comparison, within hospitality, you've got the hoteliers, we've got the contractors, the operators. Then you have the universities and the educators that are training, and the academies that train the young adults and our future leaders in the field. And what this organisation has done is called the Future Leaders Challenge, is we're bridging that. I talk about bridging the gap because it's so important to have a way of closing the gap between the real issues that are happening within the industry and how we nurture and bring the talent and the solutions that they have to the fore. So across the world, in different countries, so in the UK, it's going to be around March time. Future Leaders Challenge basically brings together about, I think that this year it was around 16 universities across the UK. Mm-hmm. It's now more as we enroll more universities. And so a challenge is set, a real industry problem is set, where the students then go away and solve that problem. So this year, for example, it was all around AI technology and solutions for industry, mm-hmm. where they came up with some, like in a hotel, for example, an iPad where they could see all of the information, what was happening in the hotel, interact with that. And so it's really closing the gap and actually providing real life solutions that can be applied within industry. And if we think about facilities management, what you're doing with ESG, the learning and the courses, and then there'll hopefully be engagement then with universities and schools and doing talks, a bit like what I've started doing for the academy. And mm-hmm. what that does is it starts to raise the awareness with the young adults, teenagers. These are issues and these are real problems that we have in industry today. And if you're looking at becoming part of that industry, you can start now by you raise the awareness it exists, because even though we talk a lot about facilities management, you can go into a school or academy and they still won't have even heard of what it is. So there's a lot to do there. But by doing what we do, we close that gap, and it means then there's future talent and leaders that can come through that vehicle.
Yeah, I love that. It's so exciting, and
it is.
Yeah, I bet it gives you a real boost when you're doing that. That's fabulous, and I think from a social perspective as well, there's so much that can be done and still needs to be done. I think even within FM, but. What would be your thoughts on the role that FM plays in terms of employment, in well-being, equality, community uplift? What's the role that our sector can really deliver on, do you think?
Because our sector is so big, facilities management is so vast. Mm. When I think about if I take my academy, for example, and whilst it's focusing on mobilisation transformation, when you think about partnership, collaboration, there's our organisations, the big players in the organisation, they're global, which means that they're in Asia, they're in parts of the world where there's communities that need support, but also the education as well. So for me, my vision is that, whether it takes a few years, however long it takes, there's the learners that are coming through the academy, they're getting the qualifications, they're getting the training. Then out the other end, you have the organisations that can utilise those people that are trained and qualified to fill those upskilling gaps that they have within the industry. Mm. The other side then is that we have volunteer days. There's already lots of initiatives that companies do, and it's just more of that. and also in remote parts where they may not get those types of opportunities, but we have companies that exist that can actually start to spread that word and create those opportunities for people.
And are you starting to see that happening, globally in terms of disadvantaged groups, so where the training and the development programs actually create long-term social and economic impact? Is that something you're starting to see now happen?
Yeah. So if I talk about so this time last year I was in Nigeria, and there was an organization there who we sponsor now they're a tech school. And what they
Okay.
do is that they'll go around the different communities and they have the programs to teach them about technology, but also what it does do, it educates them then to either go on and become entrepreneurs or work in industry. Another chap that came out to India with me earlier on in the year is from the Grow Foundation, and they're taking an active role in creating opportunities and actual jobs within the communities. And they focus on the carbon neutral, the net zero. And I do need to connect you both. Actually, it's on my list to connect you both. But
Sounds
yes,
good.
there is real change happening, and there are organisations that if a facility management company doesn't want to do it themselves, so there's organisations like B1G1 doing business for good. You become a member, and they have hundreds of projects globally that you can
Brilliant.
actually you can sponsor and become part of, and you get your quarterly impact reports. So it shows how much impact you're creating within a particular region.
Oh, brilliant.
They do this really cool thing as well, where depending on the projects you choose, depending on your sustainability goals and your values, there's a map that they have, and it just shows on the map. You can scroll in and actually see where your impact has been and what you've
Oh,
managed
nice.
to shift and change in that community. It's really
Yeah,
cool.
I love that. I love that. And I love the link. I mean, social value and sustainability are inseparable. I mean, they intersect in contracts, in procurement, in public sector expectations.
Yeah,
They should be seen with equal importance because, environmentally, socially, when you were saying earlier about the bottom line,
yeah,
being so, buoyant as a business, for instance, it always used to be the bottom line was how much money were you making, and if we're making money, everything's fine. We're sustainable from that perspective. But the reality now is that you have to factor in whether money is being made socially or environmentally acceptably, and if
yeah,
it's not, then that's not sustainable because people won't buy from you anymore. People won't want to work for you anymore, and so on. And but at the same token, you've got to position it so that it's integrated into the genuine offering of the business and part of
yeah,
the very fabric of the business, because you could be the greenest company in the world, but if you're not making money, that's also not sustainable.
yeah.
So
And
it all
and I
has to
think
link.
yeah, absolutely. And saying that being integral to the business. So with the academy, so we say 5%, just anything that we do, whether it's a workshop, whether it's the online training, whether it's a specific project, it all contributes to that social impact. So 5% of
Right.
everything just gets automatically sifted off. And then that is building the pot, as well as wanting to work with grants and sponsorships as well. That's coming. But everyone that learns with us is creating an impact.
Yeah, I love
And
that.
it's so incredible.
I love that. What are some practical steps, in your opinion, that organizations can take to adopt immediately when it comes to integrating social impact intentionally? What are some sort of practical steps you'd recommend?
Starting locally, where there's companies, if they're based on a local, if they're small, based locally or regionally, one of the things they can do is just see what is around them in their
Mm,
immediate communities. I mean, I look abroad, and because of my experience with international, that's why some of my projects are international. However, just start in your own backyard. A good example would be when I was the sourcing manager in London, and that organisation, I won't mention, but that organisation um, were really serious about their social impact and how we can support communities. And so what we did, we partnered with the local landlords of the estates that we were part of, and that then opened up the doors to the different charities that were there, um, different companies that were maybe delivering food and meals for the homeless, employment, recycling of IT equipment is as an example, being
Yeah,
repurposed then to be used for schools. And so I would say start local and really
brilliant.
really start to get involved and kind of see what initiatives are happening in your own regions.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think it's an area that tends to get overlooked. As connected as we are globally, there's a lot to be said with the diversification of a supply chain, and
Yeah.
if you can work with organisations or initiatives that are very local, then that's clearly going to be beneficial, and from a social and environmental perspective. But what would you say? I mean, shifting over to maybe looking at leadership qualities, and certainly within our rapidly changing FM landscape, what in terms of where we are now and in modern times, what would you say are some key leadership qualities that people really need to have as in their remit?
So when we think about education, we talk about emotional intelligence with in education. However, it also is valid for leadership as well. So emotional intelligence, clarity, about purpose, communication. We can talk about communication all day long, but it really, really matters. As a
Mm.
leader, how you it's not just about the words that are being said, but it's how you're communicating to your teams, how that is then being filtered throughout the organization. But also as a leader, we set the example. We are the role models for not only future generations, but the cultural shift and the mindset that's adopted within our organizations. So that emotional intelligence, the communication, clarity is really, really key. And actually, as well as being our ethics and integrity, but actually being the role models and taking people on the journey with us. Yes,
Yeah,
we have deadlines. Yes, we have targets to meet. However, that human element can get
mm.
lost in amongst all of the, oh my gosh, you know what, we're coming to the month end, we're coming to the quarter end, we're coming to
Yeah,
the year end. This is what we need to do. Um, they've got to be hand in hand, and they've got to be integral and dependent on each other. And also,
yeah,
it's the way the workplace has changed and shifted. So post pandemic, I'm in an office today. However, the working from home and the impact that's had on well-being and mental health. The
hmm,
positive being, okay, we've discovered a new quality of life, work-life balance, harmony, and then now the hybrid working with coming back into work, another shift as well. And leaders have to navigate how that affects not only the performance, but also the person as a human being, and
yeah.
how they're able to adapt and evolve with the changes that we need to do business.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that's such a key aspect of leading teams through, certainly through that transformation as well,
Mm.
because when we're asking people to think about things in a certain way or adopt different practices, there's going to be a maturity required and an emotional intelligence required to manage that potential resistance that might show itself, but also by handling it in the right way, you can genuinely inspire real change and embed new ways of working so that people can see the difference that it's making. And I think that that really helps. But maybe give us a bit of a flavor on some of your own journey in terms of your leadership. I know from obviously from MD to International Academy founder, maybe take us through some of the lessons and challenges that have helped to shape your approach.
Yeah, so being in corporate for many years, and having some great mentors, and people, it's leading by example, but also I would say for me, my journey started very early on. So I'm 30 years now in the industry. Yeah, I know. It's just
Can't
flown
be,
by.
can't be.
Yeah, I actually chose, people say, oh, I just fell into facilities. No, I actually chose this because I was coming out of a situation where I had 5 part-time jobs. And even that, I think it does shape you, and that very strong work ethic as well. And when I say leading by example, if you're expecting someone to follow you and to be inspired and motivated to work long hours, and sometimes we have really demanding clients. How are you going to navigate that if you have a leader that's not supportive, or might, and no, not supportive is not the right word, has different drivers or different objectives, but they're
Right.
missing the picture. So from my own experience, it has been, okay, who is, because when I started, I wasn't in the position I am now. I was operational. So I would look at, okay, project managers and people that are doing things really well and getting results. There was a lady many years ago, a contract manager that stood out in my earlier career. And she stood out because she was central, so back then you still have like the central procurement teams, and then you're operational, doing the operational work, and they support you, so it's like an internal service.
Right.
And I even remember her name. Oh gosh, her name was Alison. I can't remember her surname though. And what stood out for me about Alison was, you can pick up the phone and it would be, Alison, there's some clauses in this contract that I don't understand. And no matter what she was doing, it would be, right, no, don't worry about that. I'll get that sorted. And she'll come back with supporting you with explaining what it meant, what the implication was. And it was just, nothing was too much. And I think as leaders, yes, our roles are quite demanding, but we have to have that open door. And something that I learned through making a few mistakes as well is that you have to invest the time, even though we're busy, taking that time and spending that time up front when you have a new employee, or you have someone that is new in the company, or going through a change in a role, or they may have whatever it is. That upfront time pays tenfold and dividends down the line. So when someone's onboarding is so important, or inductions are really important, and they are magical moments when you're shaping that person. I say shaping and molding. You come with your personality, you come with all that energy. But what's really important about those moments is they create the journey that person is going to experience throughout their career, and for that time that they are with you. They might be with you for many years, they might only be with you for a few months, but the impact that you make, or the effect that you have on them, you're not going to actually know until years later. Call it a ripple effect, where how you conduct yourself, you don't know who's actually watching you to learn from you. And it goes for our younger generation as well, and our young leaders. How we conduct ourselves, they're watching us and learning from us. So it's so important, and that's something I learned really early on. You never know
Yeah.
who's watching and who's learning from you. And also being a parent, now my
Yeah.
now my daughter's 20, and we have these conversations, and I'm just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
never know.
Yeah, no, it's good, and I think that's great as advice for for leaders navigating the pressures and how to deal with that. But yeah, I think that's great. I mean, in terms of, I suppose, looking at the UK sector in terms of FM, and what can we learn, do you think, from some of the emerging markets? I know we often talk about what's happening on a global scale, but how can facilities management learn from the what's different across different regions like India, Africa, Asia? What can we learn from what they're doing to put into practice around what we're doing here?
So one of the things that really stood out for me. So this time last year, so my Nigerian trip, and there were some of us we called from the Western culture. What we find in emerging markets and third world countries is that there's scarcity of resources,
Mm.
and it could be technology wise, it could be resource people wise, but also what's even more scarce sometimes is the knowledge of they want to learn, they're open to doing things better, and then so in that respect they look to us to provide that knowledge and that guidance, but equally in some areas they're very much well advanced. And
Yeah.
so if you take Saudi as an
Mhm.
emerging and Dubai, I was a few years ago, a couple of years ago, I was a judge for international business, and some of the initiatives that are coming out of like the Netherlands for eco-friendly solutions, sustainability, repurposing and the recycling of materials. Some of the greatest innovations come from those emerging markets, and I think
Yeah.
what we all have something to contribute to each nation.
Yeah.
So whilst Asian markets we are advanced in terms of health and safety, in terms of quite a few areas where they can learn. Vice versa, we can learn a lot from their cultures as well.
Yeah, I think there's so much to be learned from the diversity of people and the challenges that other people face, and
Mm.
that's got to be testament to why a global view can enhance leadership training and sustainability outcomes, because sometimes efficiencies are born from necessity, and community solutions can evidence why coming together and collaborating is absolutely of benefit. So I think you're right. There's so much to learn from other regions other than just our own. But what sort of global training initiatives do you think strengthen the FM profession worldwide, would you say?
Oh, so you can't get away from a bit of cultural awareness,
Mm.
because the way we do business in facilities management, if you don't have that cultural awareness, so I'll give you an example. When mobilizing across multiple countries, you'll mobilize in a certain way and have the knowledge of how to do things in one country. So France, for example, there's going to be workers' councils, there's going to be certain legislation, there's going to be things that, and even the way they do business, you're going to have to know and understand and adapt to that.
Mm.
Germany is another all these different countries have different ways of doing things. So understanding, if you're thinking about being an international professional, traveling, working with and in other countries, learning about culture and how they do business is really important. China is a great example where many years ago I was on an exchange, and even down to how you present a business card or a greeting or conducting yourself in a meeting, all of those things, they're small, but they really matter. And it's
Yeah,
the
I love it.
difference between a great negotiation and doing business well versus just completely just getting it wrong and offending
Yeah.
offending a nation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, awareness is so key, and I think that's probably the overarching theme of our discussion today. Is that generally speaking, awareness is so key, particularly from a sustainability standpoint,
Mm.
um, and making it understandable, relatable, and digestible, so that everybody gets it. They understand why they're being asked, what they're being asked, and what the difference that they can make actually is. And
Yeah.
if you put in effort, this is what could be the result, and this is the role that you play, and so on. I think it helps to empower people and make sure that they feel part of the solution, which is clearly got to be the way forward. How can people get to grips with and understand better what you do? What should they do to connect with you or follow you or your journey? What can they do? Where should we point people?
Yeah, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So it's Maxine Quirke. I am the only one on LinkedIn as Maxine Quirke. So put that in, and yes, it's me. I do have oh my gosh, hundreds of blogs as well about various topics across industry, technology, oh my goodness, operations, mobile, any topic. And that's www.mcfmglobal.com. And then my academy, there are some free courses on there. There's bite-sized learning, as well as some of the more advanced lessons. And that's www.mcfmgacademy.com.
Fabulous. Well, once again, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our chat, and great to catch up with you. And yeah, looking forward to catching up again soon.
Thank you so much, Alan. It's really been great to see you again.
Thanks for listening to Emission Possible. If today's episode sparked an idea or presented a challenge, please reach out and let us know. Subscribe, share, and stay tuned, because net zero is absolutely possible.